Today, we are talking about Everyone's an Author, Chapter 10, Reflecting on Your Writing. The power of reflection in writing. Today's focus is on understanding the role of reflection in the writing process. Reflection doesn't just follow writing, it's an integral part of that helps you learn from past experiences, understand your unique writing process, and improve as a writer. Why reflection matters. Reflection allows us to pause and assess our writing journey. It provides insights into the choices we make, help us identify what works and what doesn't, and enables us to carry valuable lessons into future writing tasks. Reflecting as a writer, why it's important. It enhances self-awareness. Reflection helps you become more aware of your strengths and areas for growth. It builds your writing skills. Through reflection, you can see patterns in your writing habits and processes, allowing you to refine your approach. And it supports future success. Each reflective practice you engage in builds a foundation of strategies you can use for new and unfamiliar writing tasks. The key takeaway: reflection is about learning from experience to become a more confident and effective writer. Reflect to assess past experiences as a writer. The purpose: before starting a new writing task, take time to reflect on past writing experiences. This helps you understand how your past influences the way you approach writing today. What to reflect on. Think about previous assignments, courses, and even writing experiences outside of school. Reflect on both positive and negative experiences. For example, perhaps you remember an assignment that went really well, where you felt confident in control of your writing process. Or maybe you struggled with a particular genre or format, which has since shaped your approach. The outcome. Reflecting in this way can lead to a literacy narrative, where you explore how your history with writing has shaped you. This type of reflection helps you approach new writing with greater awareness of what strategies work best for you. Reflect to identify your process and strategies. Every writer has a unique process. Writing isn't a one-size-fits-all activity. Different writers use different approaches, and reflection helps you recognize yours. Steps in your process. Think about the steps you take from brainstorming to final revisions. For example, did you start with brainstorming, then create an outline, draft, and revise? Did you seek feedback from a friend or a writing center? Or maybe you completed a draft in one sitting without extensive planning. Evaluating each step. Break down your process without judgment, listing each step, then evaluate each one. What helped you move forward, and what strategies were less effective? The outcome. This exercise helps you identify practices to keep, improve, or discard. It allows you to refine your process and make adjustments to enhance productivity and creativity. Reflect to understand your decisions. Writing is about making choices. Every decision in writing, from genre to tone, style, and structure, affects how your message is received. Reflection allows you to analyze these choices. Questions to ask: why did you choose a specific genre or format? 2. How did your rhetorical situation, audience, purpose, context influence your decisions? 3. Did your chosen writing strategies, narrative, description, comparison, etc., support your purpose? How did you decide on language and tone? Did these choices connect with your intended audience? The outcome. Reflecting on your choices allows you to understand your own decision-making process and see where you can make stronger, more intentional choices in the future. This also helps you carry successful strategies into new writing contexts. For example, if you've found success using vivid imagery in a personal narrative, consider how similar descriptive language might enhance a persuasive essay. Reflect to transfer skills across contexts. Applying skills to new challenges. Reflecting helps you see how strategies you've developed in one context can apply to another. For instance, skills honed in lab reports for science can be useful in data analysis for economics. Analyze your rhetorical situation. When faced with a new assignment, ask yourself, how is this similar to writing you've done before? What strategies or techniques from previous writing could help you? Outcome. Through this kind of reflection, you'll learn to adapt and apply your skills to different types of writing, ensuring your writing remains flexible and adaptable. Reflect to plan what's left to do. Reflection for improvement. Pausing midway through a draft allows you to assess what's working and what isn't. This can be a powerful tool for revision. Create a revision plan. Take note of areas that need improvement, introduction, evidence, examples, etc. Identify any additional research, language adjustments, or structural changes you might need. Make a to-do list or revision plan to guide your next steps. The outcome. This focused approach allows you to make purposeful revisions rather than aimlessly editing. You'll have clear goals, which makes the revision process more manageable and effective. For example, perhaps after rereading your draft, you realize the conclusion feels weak. Your plan might include strengthening it with a powerful final thought or a call to action. Reflect to grow and improve as a writer. Reflection as a growth tool. All of these reflective practices create space to evaluate what's working, what needs improvement, and how you can grow as a writer. Seeing patterns in your writing. Regular reflection helps you identify habits, both productive and unproductive. Over time, you'll develop a sense of which habits to cultivate and which to avoid. Mapping a path forward. Use reflection as an opportunity to set goals for yourself as a writer. Which practices do you want to carry into your next project? Which strategies will you try to refine or eliminate? The final thought. Reflection isn't just a backwards glance, it's also a way to look forward. With every piece of writing, you're building a foundation of skills and knowledge that will help carry over to future projects. Embrace reflection as part of the writing process. Reflection is a tool for self-assessment, growth, and improvement. It helps you become aware of your unique process. Understand the choices you make and carry valuable lessons into future work. Metacognition, thinking about thinking while you write. The mind behind the writing. When we write, most of our attention is on the page, the sentences, the organization, the argument, the word choice. But today I want you to look behind the pages, into the mind doing the writing. This is where the idea of metacognition comes in. Metacognition simply means thinking about your thinking. It's the ability to step back and notice what your mind is doing while you're doing it. In writing, metacognition is the secret tool that separates routine writing from intentional writing. It's the difference between just finishing a paper and actually learning something about yourself as a writer. So today we're going to talk about what metacognition really means, how it shows up in your writing process, the difference between reflecting on how you wrote versus what you wrote, and finally how metacognition creates what I call the writing loop, a continuous cycle of awareness, reflection, and improvement. Defining metacognition. Let's start with a clear definition. Metacognition means being aware of your own thought process, noticing how you think, how you problem solve, and how you make decisions. It's a skill we use in everyday life, often without realizing it. For example, when you study for an exam and realize flashcards help me remember better than reading, that's metacognition. Or when you're trying to explain something to a friend and suddenly think, this explanation isn't clear, let me start over. That's metacognition too. In writing, it means paying attention to how you're approaching your work, what strategies you're using, what's helping and what's holding you back. It's like being both the driver and the mechanic of your own mind. You're steering the car, but you're also aware of how the engine's running. Why metacognition matters for writers. Without metacognition, writing becomes automatic. You just move through the motions, brainstorm, draft, submit, without really understanding what's happening in your process. But when you think metacognitively, you start to make conscious choices. You can ask, what strategy is working best for me right now? Where do I usually get stuck and why? And what can I do differently next time? Metacognition gives you the power to self-correct before problems grow too big. It helps you write smarter, not just harder. It's like having a mental rear-view mirror at a GPS. You're aware of where you've been and where you're headed at the same time. How writers shift between thinking modes. Let's break down what happens in your mind when you write. Writers constantly shift between different kinds of thinking. There's planning, deciding what to say and how to say it, drafting, translating ideas into words, revising, seeing what works and what doesn't, and evaluating, judging clarity, tone, and purpose. And you don't move through these in a perfect line. You loop back and forth all the time. You might start drafting, then realize your argument isn't strong enough, so you jump back to planning. Or you might finish revising a paragraph and then decide to rethink your whole structure. Metacognitive awareness means noticing when you're switching modes and why. You start to understand your own rhythm as a writer, where you gain energy and where you lose it. For example, maybe you're great at brainstorming, but freeze when you have to start drafting. Or maybe you write freely but struggle to revise because you hate cutting your own work. Recognizing these tendencies is the first step toward mastering them. Process reflection versus content reflection. Now let's talk about two different kinds of reflection that metacognition makes possible: process reflection and content reflection. Process reflection is how I wrote it. This type focuses on your mental and practical process, the how of your writing. You might ask yourself, how did I approach this assignment? Which strategies helped me organize my thoughts? When did I get stuck and what helped me get unstuck? How did feedback influence my revisions? Process reflection is about understanding your habits and decisions as a writer. Content reflection, what I wrote about. This type focuses on your subject or message, the what of your writing. You might ask, what did I learn about this topic through writing? Did my opinions or interpretations change as I wrote? What new insights did I discover while researching or drafting? Both kinds of reflection are important, but process reflection is what truly builds your metacognitive skill. It trains you to look behind the essay's topic and into the machinery of your own thinking. The writing loop: plan, write, reflect, adjust, repeat. Now that we understand the role of metacognition, let's talk about how it turns writing into a continuous learning process, or what I call the writing loop. The loop has 5 stages. Plan. You consider your purpose, audience, and goals before you start. You ask questions like, what am I trying to say, and who am I writing for? You write. You get your ideas down. Here, the focus is on expression, not perfection. You reflect. You pause and step back to think, is this working? Am I on track? This is where your metacognitive awareness kicks in. And then you adjust. Based on your reflection, you revise or rethink your approach. And then repeat. You loop back into the cycle each time with more clarity and confidence. This cycle doesn't end when you turn in your paper. It keeps going throughout your writing life. The more you engage with this loop, the more you build what psychologists call self-regulation, the ability to monitor and guide your own learning. It's not just about getting better at writing, it's about becoming more intentional in how you think and learn. Metacognition in action, a real example. Let's imagine a student, we'll call her Maya, who's writing a research paper. At first, she starts writing without a plan and gets stuck halfway through. She realizes her evidence doesn't really support her thesis. Instead of panicking, Maya pauses. She asks herself, why did this happen? Oh, I didn't outline clearly before I started. My thoughts weren't organized. That's metacognition in action. Next time Maya begins with a detailed outline. When she starts to feel overwhelmed during drafting, she thinks, okay, I tend to overthink introductions. Let me skip to the body paragraph and come back later. That's another metacognitive decision, noticing a personal pattern and adapting her strategy. By the end of the semester, Maya isn't just producing better essays, she's aware of how she writes. She can explain her choices, fix her weaknesses, and replicate her success. That's the power of thinking about thinking. Common metacognitive questions for writers. If you want to strengthen your metacognitive muscles, start asking yourself reflective questions throughout your process. Before writing, what do I already know about this topic? What strategies usually help me get started? What challenges do I expect and how can I prepare for them? During writing, what's going well right now? Am I staying on purpose? Where do I feel stuck and why? After writing, what surprised me about this process? What did I do differently from last time? And what will I carry forward into my next assignment? Asking these questions turns writing into an active mental dialogue rather than a one-way task. metacognition and confidence. Here's the hidden bonus of metacognition. It builds confidence. When you know how you write, you stop feeling like good writing is random luck. You start to understand the moves that lead to success. You can say, this worked because I revised with feedback, or that didn't work because I rushed the outline. Confidence doesn't come from believing you're perfect. It comes from knowing you can adjust, improve, and grow because you understand your own process. Metacognition transforms anxiety into curiosity. Instead of saying, I hate revising, you start to ask, what does revision teach me about my ideas? That mindset shift changes everything. Metacognition beyond the classroom. Finally, metacognition isn't just a writing skill, it's a life skill. It helps you in any situation that requires problem solving or creativity. Professionals use it constantly. Scientists track how they form hypotheses. Teachers reflect on what teaching strategies worked. Athletes review what mental routines help them perform best. Writers do the same thing. You're essentially training yourself to think like a strategist, someone who's always learning from experience. Once you start thinking metacognitively, you'll notice it everywhere. You'll edit an email and think I sound too formal here. You'll plan a speech and realize I need a better hook. You'll be aware of how your mind builds communication in real time, and that awareness makes you powerful. Conclusion: the writer as a thinker. So when you sit down to write your next paper, don't just focus on the page. Listen to your mind, pay attention to your patterns, ask questions about what's happening as you write. Writing is never just about the words, it's about the thinking that shapes them. The more you understand that thinking, the stronger and more adaptable you'll become as a writer and as a learner. Metacognition reminds us that writing isn't magic, it's a mental craft, and the more you study your own mind at work, the better that craft becomes. Now we're talking about the psychology of writing, why we avoid reflection. Writing isn't just an intellectual act, it's an emotional one. Every time we write, we're putting a piece of ourselves out into the world. Our ideas, our language, our effort, and sometimes even our insecurities. That's why reflection, the act of looking back at what we've written, can feel so uncomfortable. Today we're going to explore why writers avoid reflection and how understanding that emotional resistance can actually make us stronger, more resilient writers. By the end of today's lecture, you should understand why reflection feels vulnerable, the mental traps that block honest self-assessment, and how self-compassion leads to better writing, and how a growth mindset can turn mistakes into meaningful data. Reflection requires vulnerability. Let's start with the truth that every writer knows deep down. Reflection forces vulnerability. When we reread our own work, we're confronting ourselves, our choices, our habits, our strengths, and our flaws. That's not easy. It means admitting I could have done better, or this part doesn't work, or even I didn't try as hard as I could have. It's much more comfortable to move on to the next assignment than to look back at one that's already done. But reflection asks us to pause and to sit with imperfection. That pause can trigger self-doubt. It can make us think, I don't want to see how bad this sounds. If I look too closely, I'll find mistakes I can't fix now. And if I reflect, I might have to admit that I struggled. But vulnerability is not weakness, it's awareness. Reflection gives you the courage to face your process honestly, and that honesty is where growth begins. The fear behind avoidance. So let's look at what's really behind the avoidance. Most of the time it isn't laziness, it's fear. There are 3 common mental traps that keep writers from reflecting. 1. Perfectionism. Perfectionism tells you that your writing should be flawless, that good writers don't make mistakes. So when you find errors or awkward phrases, your brain goes straight to shame. A real writer wouldn't have messed that up. That mindset can stop you from even looking at your work because reflection feels like proof that you're not good enough. But here's the irony. Perfectionists rarely improve. They edit endlessly without reflecting meaningfully. They polish sentences, but they never step back to ask, what's really working here? What's not? Perfectionism is the enemy of progress because it replaces learning with fear. Fear of judgment. Another major reason we avoid reflection is that we don't want to relive judgment, especially external judgment. You've probably felt this before. You get an essay back with feedback, and before you even look, you feel your stomach twist. You tell yourself, I already know it's bad. That emotional reaction, embarrassment, frustration, defensiveness, is completely normal. It's your brain trying to protect you from discomfort. But reflection asks you to push past that reflection and look at the feedback with curiosity, not shame. Instead of asking, why did they mark this wrong, try asking, what's this feedback showing me about how I think and write? When you reframe the feedback as information rather than criticism, reflection becomes empowering. The just get it done thinking. The third trap is what I call the checklist mentality. The idea that once you've turned in an assignment, it's finished forever. This mindset is fueled by academic culture. We're trained to focus on grades, deadlines, and completion, not growth. So reflection feels optional, like something extra rather than something essential. But here's the problem. If you never pause to reflect, every new assignment becomes a repeat of the last one. You carry your old mistakes forward without even noticing them. Reflection is how you break that cycle. It's how you stop writing reactively and start writing intentionally. The role of self-compassion. Now that we've talked about fear and perfectionism, let's talk about their antidote, self-compassion. Self-compassion doesn't mean letting yourself off the hook. It means giving yourself the same patience and understanding you'd give a friend. Imagine your friend says, I'm terrible at writing. You wouldn't respond, yeah, you are. You'd probably say, no, you're just still learning. Everyone struggles with writing. But when we talk to ourselves, we often say things like, I'm just bad at this. I'll never get it right. Or, this is pointless. Self-compassion reframes that inner voice. Instead of saying, I'm bad at this, you say, I'm still learning this skill. That small shift in language turns shame into motivation. Because the truth is, writing is not a natural born talent. It's a trainable skill. Every time you write and reflect, you're not proving your worth. You're practicing your craft. When you treat yourself with kindness, you create a safe space to experiment, fail, and grow, which are all essential parts of learning to write well. The growth mindset. Mistakes are data. Now let's connect to one of the most powerful ideas in educational psychology, the growth mindset. A growth mindset is the belief that skills, including writing, can be developed through effort, feedback, and persistence. The opposite is a fixed mindset, the belief that writing ability is something you either have or you don't. Students with a fixed mindset say things like, I'm just not a good writer. I can't do introductions. I'm not creative. Students with a growth mindset say things like, I'm not strong at introductions yet. This draft was hard, but I learned what doesn't work. The difference between those two perspectives is reflection. Reflection lets you see mistakes not as proof of failure, but as data, valuable information about how your mind works. Every awkward sentence, every messy paragraph, every piece of feedback is a clue. It's telling you something about how you think, how you organize, and how you communicate. When you start to view writing mistakes like a scientist views experiments as data to study, not disasters to hide, you unlock your ability to grow. The interactive reflection prompt. Let's try something together. Take a moment and think about a time when you didn't want to look at feedback on a paper. Maybe it was an essay that didn't go the way you'd hoped. Maybe it was a comment that stung. Ask yourself, what emotion was driving that avoidance? Was it embarrassment, frustration, fear, exhaustion? And then when you finally looked at the feedback, what did you learn? Usually, once we push past the emotion, we find that the feedback wasn't as scary as we thought. In fact, it often gives us exactly the information we need to get better next time. That's the essence of this lesson. The hardest part of reflection isn't intellectual, it's emotional. Once you learn to face that emotion with curiosity instead of fear, reflection becomes not a punishment, but a tool. How reflection strengthens resilience. When you start practicing reflection with honesty and compassion, something powerful happens. You build resilience. You begin to see writing as a long-term journey instead of a single assignment. You stop asking, was this paper good? And start asking, what did I learn from it? That's the mark of reflective, confident writer. Not someone who never makes mistakes, but someone who learns from every one. And that mindset doesn't just make you a better writer, it makes you a stronger learner in every area of life. Because the truth is, the ability to reflect without fear is the foundation of growth. It's what turns experience into wisdom. So the closing thought. When you catch yourself avoiding feedback or hesitating to reread an old draft, pause for a second. Ask yourself, what am I afraid of seeing? Chances are, what you'll actually see isn't failure. It's evidence of effort. It's proof that you've been practicing, experimenting, and learning all along. Reflection takes courage, but it also builds courage. And every time you face that discomfort and look honestly at your work, you're strengthening the most important muscle a writer can have: self-awareness. Because at its core, writing isn't just about producing words, it's about understanding the person who wrote them.